All right, all right, all right. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. We have opened with one person watching. We moving up in the world. Usually it's negative. We open with nobody watching and somebody say I owe them something. My name is Javontae Lee Williams, and thank you for joining me for the third one, two, three conversation. I am so excited that about this conversation, so I'm not going to belabor the point. We're talking about 2020, 2021. Where's God? As a person who subscribes to the tradition of Christian leftist, I know exactly where God has been, right in our midst. And I'm really excited to have a conversation with these individuals that are on the panel tonight and talk about the things that we all know have been very hard for us over the last 18 months. And so, do me a favor if you're watching this live, drop in the chat where you are coming from. And if you are watching this on the replay, comment down below what attracted your attention. And so I'm going to bring out our guests for tonight's panel discussion. Naomi Washington-Leapheart, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Pastor Taylor Martin, and Marvin K. White. Welcome all.
Hey, everybody.
So I am extremely excited to have this conversation, and I've been getting a lot of feedback about it. Let me set my timer because we're not gonna go into overtime on this, because we could have this conversation forever and a day. But I'm extremely excited about this conversation. I got a lot of feedback about the title, "Where is God?" and particularly the is he dead or just ignoring us? And so I want to give a disclaimer that tonight um, we're going to be talking more so about the Christian tradition, and the connection that I have with these panelists is very personal. And so I would have had other people of faith and different faith communities represented, but I think when I explain why these group of people are here, it'll make a little bit more sense. And so last year, when we were in the midst and throes of the COVID lockdowns, I was having panic attacks. I was depressed. I had gained a significant amount of weight. And I'm talking about this is the beginning. So this is like go home 2 weeks for work from home. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Um, and 2 weeks turned into 2 months, and 2 months has now turned into 18 months later. And things are still not back to what we perceive as normal. Um, and so a lot of people are asking, particularly people of faith and people who are skeptic about our faith, where is God? And I'll describe something. Um, Marvin and Pastor Martin both are affiliated with ministries, which they will talk about, and have live streamed their services. And one day, like Miss Sophia in The Color Purple, I was feeling mighty low. I was feeling mighty low. And I turned on Facebook. I sound real old. I turned on Facebook and I started scrolling, and I just scrolled past their live streams and the worship and the ministry of the communities that they lead and are part of was so impactful. And then one day in April, one fine Sunday afternoon, the mayor of Philadelphia was giving a daily update about coronavirus. And they had a special moment for people of faith, and it was on a Sunday. And so they invited Reverend Naomi, and she was standing at the podium and she prayed. And she didn't just pray a prayer of comfort, but she called down fire. And it was such an eloquent prayer that spoke to exactly what I needed. And so I would ask whoever wants to go first where you think God is at this moment. And feel free to take this question to introduce yourself.
I'll begin. Hello, everybody. I am Naomi Washington-Leapheart, and I'm based in Philadelphia. I work as the director for faith-based and interfaith affairs for the mayor's office in the city of Philadelphia, and have come into the role uh, in a pandemic. I was hired just 3 months before, 2 months, 3 months before the shutdown in March of 2020. And um, to begin to try to get at this question of where is God during this pandemic. You know, I, I will say first of all that I struggle to know precisely where God is and what God is doing, particularly when we, as a collective humanity, are facing such loss and such grief and such heartbreak and such injustice. It that question is the evergreen question that um, puts me in a position to be faithful,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I feel like if I knew if I was certain all the time, then I wouldn't need to be faithful. I wouldn't need to have faith. And so um, I will say that also um, the people who have given themselves over the last year and a half to keeping people alive. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean all of the ways we can be kept alive, right?
Yeah.
So I'm talking about physically, but I'm also talking about psychologically and emotionally and spiritually. They are God incarnate
Yes.
because I believe God to be a God who is most interested in our aliveness, not just our survival,
Yeah.
but in our coming alive. And so wherever I see people working to keep folk alive, I know
Mhm.
that God is there. And that's basically my answer to the question any given
Yes.
moment, right? That,
Yes.
that
Yes.
wherever there is life, wherever there's life being cultivated and nurtured, that is precisely where God is.
I should have known to have a panel with preachers that we were going to be preaching. Who would like to go next? Who would like to go next?
I would, I would. One of the ways that I think about where God is in the access that we have into people's homes, because our church is virtual, because our congregational life is virtual. I get to see how people participate in church at home. So I get to see where they think their sacred spot is for them to participate. I see their kitchens, into their bedrooms. I see random people in their background who they let into their space.
Mhm.
Don't even talk about dog bombing and cat bombing and,
Yep.
you know, um, but it's an amazing view to where God is in people's personal spaces, where they are in their most intimate moments, where it's the real, true come abide with me or in me.
Mhm.
Um, and we get to see that.
Mhm.
And it's really quite amazing to see people who have taken church home with them,
Mhm.
um, and are engaging with God we get to meet the God of their understanding
Yeah.
because, they show up in it. And so I've seen God in 1,000 homes,
Mhm.
since the pandemic has started.
Yeah. You want to tell the people where you serve and a little bit more about your work?
Yeah, so my name is Marvin K. White. I'm the minister of celebration at Glide Memorial Church in San Francisco. So I'm the senior minister there. I am a poet with 4 collections of poetry, and I'm a writer, public theologian. Uh, yeah, old black man. Just
You are not old.
old
You are
black
not
man. I'm
old.
very clear. Don't take that away from me. You know, I've been working towards that.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I love these conversations. And I love conversations about relevant incarnations of God and where's God today. That's really important to me.
Thank you. Thank you. Pastor Martin, your pastor's pastor.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I'm so honored and blessed to be a part of this discussion. Honestly, I definitely agree with what the other two individuals have spoken. For me, the God in us has been more influential and more apparent for me now in this season than ever before. And what I mean by that is the church home, like the church environment. Marvin K. White spoke on it. We see God in people's homes and in their home environment, in the virtual environment, but more so, we've been challenged to see the God within us in this time and in this season more than ever before. Like for me personally, has not been 2020 and 2021 have been the most amazing time and also the roughest time that I've ever experienced in my life. And so, I've had to really dig deep and see, the God in me and the God in other individuals that I've come into contact more than I've ever had to see before. And so that's where God's been. He's been on the inside working on me, challenging me to see, even though the environment, even though, outwardly things look a certain way, he's still present. He's still here, and to search for him. The word of God tells us all the time, like if you ask, it'll be given unto you, seek and you shall find, knock and the door shall be open. That seeking part, I've had to look for God more now in this season than I have ever had to look for God before. And I found him, in every space and place that I've looked for him. But I definitely had to search for him because this has been, like I said, it's been a rough time. I'm not going to sugarcoat it or, say anything contrary to what I truly believe and what I've experienced. But I've had to look for God. And I know a lot of other people have. My church, I'm from Promises Church in Philadelphia. We got started in December of 2020. So literally like during COVID is when the ministry was birthed. I've been in ministry for over 20 years now at this point, but specifically with the ministry that God had me to start, it was during COVID. We started virtually. A lot of other churches were trying to figure out how to do the virtual thing, and we had to start that way. That's how we kind of got started. And there was no other option, for us, and still moving and operating in that space. And honestly, like, we are very big in the you matter space. And so we just are here to remind people that in the midst of everything that's going on, that God still finds value in each and every one of us. And it's not something that we just tell people. It's something that I've had to experience, so that's where we're coming from. And if you're asking me where I see God in all of this, honestly, I see God in the individuals, like in us, within us.
Mm-hmm. That's the word. That's the word. So now that y'all good and warmed up, let's dive deeper. Let's dive deeper because we said a prayer before we started, and Reverend Naomi, you talked about the prophetic tradition, and I wanted you to speak a little bit more about that because I know, like, I wasn't always a heathen. So when I finished high school, I finished a little bit early. Um, and I went to a year of seminary and I realized that wasn't for me. But the ministry is still there, right? I went into sociology and public health to serve in a different way. And so I'm very familiar with the language of the prophetic, but I wanted you to unpack that a little bit more for the viewing audience of four people and my mama to talk a little bit about what it means to you, what the prophetic tradition means to you, and what that means about searching for spirituality, for the divine, for God.
Yeah, well, let me just say that, the longer I'm in ministry, the more heathen I become. I feel like I'm in good company.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. I got your back.
yeah, so, to ask the question, where God are you, is to, I think I said in the prayer, be in line with the prophetic tradition
Mm-hmm.
that the Bible has a witness for
Mm-hmm.
this kind of searching and seeking, for this kind of skepticism, frankly,
Mm-hmm.
for this kind of side eyeing
Mm-hmm.
that we've been doing during this pandemic. How is it, right, that Black folk have been so disproportionately impacted by COVID? How is it that we are still experiencing death by white supremacist violence during a pandemic, during a lockdown? How is it that Haiti can't get a break, right? Um, so these are questions that the prophets asked.
Mm-hmm.
This is a tension that the prophets felt,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and even Jesus, yes, Jesus,
Yeah.
um, asked the question, is this still the plan? What I
Mhm,
need
mhm,
clarity on the plan, right?
mhm.
God, why have you forsaken me? Right.
Mm,
So we are
mm,
right in line with the biblical witness. And so it's not a strange question. It is a question that is timeless.
yeah,
It's evergreen, right?
yeah,
For human beings to experience life and wonder, is anybody out there listening to my prayer? Can anybody come and see about me? Right. So that's all I meant, is that while some may think it blasphemous or sacrilegious to have the nerve to ask God why and what for,
yeah,
we are actually in line with the prophetic tradition of our faith,
yeah.
Yeah.
and the prophetic tradition of Jesus.
Mhm.
And so we then are all in good company to
Yeah.
ask the question. Yeah.
It's kind of like being a journalist of spirit, right? Asking those who, why, what, where, when questions never goes away, you know? And so
Right.
it's like we move from the why to the where. I can do it if I just know where you are.
Mm.
Show me where you are, right? And so asking a different question, the what. Marvin, what do you think people misunderstand about God?
Really? Um,
I'm trying with my Oprah. I'm trying my Oprah. What do you think people misunderstand about God?
you know, I think even in that question, the singularity
mm,
is
yeah,
probably, what challenges a lot of people, that we are quick to um, download the latest software on our computers and get our cars tuned up and get them recalled when they're recalled and do all the things. But for some reason, we don't think that God changes, you
ah,
know. And I think when we are stuck with my mama's God, you know, it feels like a burden. It feels like we're caregiving. It feels like, we're watching out for aging parents.
mhm,
Um, and until we, and when my mom was passing, and when she passed, and I no longer had anyone in the world that would ever call me son, like that was gone. And
mhm,
I had no one in the world that I would ever call mother again. Like that relationship changed, and she wasn't my mother, but I had access to her in a different way. I, I located her, and I needed her differently, and I refused to let her go. Um, and she started working as an ancestor very quickly on my behalf. But I feel like, you know, if people get things wrong, it's that they think that God is fixed somewhere
mhm,
and immutable. Did I really try to use that word? And unchangeable.
mhm, mhm,
um, and God is changed. Let's do some,
mhm,
Octavia Butler right now.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, Pastor Martin, you nodding. You want to get in on this?
It's good. This is some good stuff. I don't think y'all even understand. I'm still grasping the concept of the stuff that you're asking. This is some amazing stuff to kind of tackle. For me, if I think that it's something just in my experience that people have misunderstood about God, it's how gracious he is and how loving he or she, however you want to view it, how gracious God is. I think that a lot of people struggle with that. I grew up in very Pentecostal, church type of background, and
That
God
part.
is very this way, and that's it. And there's no it's a box, and it's very limited. And for God to be so awesome, he could not possibly be as limited as we have, been taught that God is. And so I don't believe that. I believe that he's so loving. I tap into that part of him. I believe that God never created us to be anything outside of our authentic selves. And I believe part of our struggle in life has been that we've been trying to be people that he did not, or God did not create us, he or she, because I'm still learning, I'm still grasping a hold of all of that, God created us to be. And I think that's part of the struggle, is that, there's so much grace to God. And when I mess up and when I make a mistake or when I fall short, that God loves me regardless. And I think people don't understand the magnitude of God's love for us. And that, we live in a society, for me personally, where I've experienced people may not, everybody doesn't want to see you win in life. Like that's just, it's the reality of it. But God is not that way. And so I have been growing up treating God as if God was human. And God said, I'm not a man that I should lie, neither the son of man that I should repent. But he was reminding, or he or she, God was reminding us that God was not like man. And so if God's not like man, he or she could not possibly be this being that, was limited, like just our way of thinking. The word tells us his ways are not our ways, his thoughts are not our thoughts. So high as the heavens are, from the earth, that's how high, and his ways are from our ways, and his thoughts are our thoughts. So like I am still just tapping in this season to how much God truly does love me, how gracious God is. When I fall short, it's not the end of the world. Like I'm not cast out. I don't have to sit in the corner. I don't have to hide. I can still be effective in my brokenness. I can still be impactful, through the stuff that I'm going through. I mean, I'm still learning. And so I want to just be very transparent about that. There are some things that I'm still yet trying to understand about how awesome God is, but I'm enjoying the journey. And so again, if I think that it's one thing that I can pinpoint, or two, it's God's graciousness and God's love for us. I can't fathom, like how amazing that is, or how far that reaches. And I think people misunderstand that. When you grow up in church, and Marvin touched on it, my mama's God, like my mama's vision and view of church, it's limited. And I'm not casting any blame. We only pass down what we learn. And so I don't, blame anybody. But for me, God is so much bigger than what I learned when I was growing up. He's so much more, he or she, so much more amazing. This being loves me no matter what, and wants me to be me, and nobody else. So
and I asked that question with the inherent understanding that it's a very arrogant question to ask, that we could comprehend God in the fullness, right? I heard a quote before. It said, man carved up God and called it religion. And so for us to even think that we could fully understand this intelligence that created us, whatever you believe, if you believe in a higher power, if you believe in God or spirit of the universe, something created and breathed life into you. So how in the world could you comprehend that being, right? And I think that there's this acknowledgement and this perceived arrogance that we could understand the divine. What we can understand is this slither of time that we occupy, this space that we occupy. And I think for me, it's a very refreshing thing to tap into that. I don't understand everything. I don't understand everything. Let's start with that. And I see Marvin and Naomi. You're like, tap me in, coach. I got something to say. And y'all know we only have 4 minutes left, right? But tap me in. I got something to say. I'm gonna say this and then turn over the mic. But for me, I'm concerned that there's this expectation of perfectionism, right? There's this expectation that I'm supposed to have it all together, be all together, never be vulnerable, never fail. And it's causing this mass exodus away from God, right? It's causing people to shut down. They don't even want to have a conversation about spirituality. They don't want to have a conversation about their religious practice, whatever it may be. They're leaving the churches in droves. It started with Gen Xers, then down to millennials, and now Gen Zs just don't even show up, right? And so the institutions that I care about, if you are an institutionalist, like if you believe in the organized way of people gathering, are slowly dying, right? And so I was so encouraged to see you start your ministry, because I feel like that is a different perspective that no one is assuming. Naomi, what do you got to add to this? And then cross it to Mark.
So here's a place of tension for me, a place of, maybe say, curiosity for me. I teach a class, so I teach theology at Villanova University. I've been there since 2016, 2017 school year. And one of the classes I designed is called "Do Black Lives Matter to God?" It's a fundamentally a class about human suffering and how Black folk in particular have made sense of that suffering um, through faith or in faith or with faith, right? And one of the sort of conundrums that we name right away in the class is that we have all inherited a God understanding, thinking about mama's God, grandmama's God. We've all inherited a God whose knowledge is perfect and complete. Right?
Hmm.
We say God is omnipotent, all
Mhm.
powerful, and omniscient, all knowing, and omnipresent everywhere. Right? We say this. Uh, and evil and suffering seem to persist and even seem to prevail sometimes, right? And so, how can I hold together that God is all knowing and all powerful and all present, present everywhere, with the fact that suffering persists,
Mhm.
right? There seems to be some dissonance, right? And so, what we do throughout the semester is we toggle the God side. I mean, we do toggle the suffering and evil side. Like, how can we get that? But when we say, what if God is not omniscient?
Hmm.
And most times my students are like, no, this is not even, no. This is not even, we won't even entertain the idea. And I push and I push and I push and we read some things and we watch some things. And ultimately we read theologians, Black theologians, who maintain that God doesn't need perfect and complete knowledge to
Hmm.
be God
Mm.
and to be powerful,
Mhm.
right? We have a colloquial saying in our culture that knowledge is power,
Hmm.
right? We believe that to know is to have power. And so we need a God who knows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This goes back to what Marvin's talking about in terms of the fixed quality of God. We need a God who is sure all the time, who is certain all the time, right? Because we can't trust if you don't know,
Yeah.
right? I need you to know. Um, but I have evolved in my theological understanding
Mhm.
of God's knowledge, right? That what if God is discovering just like we are?
Hmm.
And listen, I'm not trying to say we are God and to equate. That's not, I don't think that that's a useful conversation. But what I am saying is that um, it doesn't need to be so threatening.
Hmm.
Mhm.
God doesn't. what what kind of God do we have if that God is so threatened by
Yeah. Yeah.
the idea of discovery, the
Oh.
idea of of dynamism, right? That change is like we're all, you influence me and I influence you, right? I'm different after I leave your presence,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? And so same thing, you know. Um, and so I say all that to say that I think God needs our help. To go back to your question, what do people misunderstand about God? I mean, I think that we think that God doesn't really need us. I mean,
Mhm.
we're here at the pleasure of God's, you know.
Mhm.
And I'm like, well, what if God wants to just partner with us? God is like, can you just come with me and share in this with me,
Mhm.
right? And we might have different uh we might have different essences, we might have different characteristics, and we might have different kinds of power. But the fact of the matter is, God is trying, always trying to beckon us
Hmm.
to partner, I think.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and so that for me changes everything. But I recognize that there is some security in a God who has it all under control.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh, my question is, life seems to suggest that either God is out of control or God has no regard
Hmm.
for us.
Mhm.
And I refuse. Just like just like Pastor Martin is saying, I refuse to believe God is anything but extravagantly loving
Yeah.
towards us, wastefully
Mhm.
loving toward us. And so I got to believe then that God is waiting on us to come, right? And together, we and God can remake the world.
Ah. So, Pastor Martin, you got to put a shirt in the mail for Reverend Naomi. Promises Church has one of these shirts. Don't play with me, I'm anointed. I got mine
Facts.
in the mail.
Facts.
So,
I'll
don't
come
play
pick
with
it
that
up.
woman.
I'll
She's
come pick it up.
anointed. Marvin, you wanted to jump in on this.
Um, yeah, this is. Um, I want to align myself and with arrogant people.
hmm
Um, I think about Eve.
hmm
You know, tired of being served and expressing what she's hungry for, which are two different things.
hmm
Like feeding people and someone saying, "This is what I'm hungry for,"
Yeah.
and wanting to know, and how early that is in this story, that the first person who wanted to know something was punished and is the reason why all of this happened. And a God that's all knowing can't be all greedy too. you
hmm
know like, how's she gonna salt her food if she don't know like what's in the food?
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know it's just, it makes, and so we call it arrogance. But I just think we want to be a part of the mystery and a
hmm
part of creation, and, you know, understand as much as we can how things work so we can be better stewards and better community with the things. Um, you know, Knowledge is instruction.
Yeah.
How did you put this together, God? I
Yeah.
want to know. Don't just like give it to me, like, let, give me the pieces and let me figure it out, but
Yeah.
this idea that those who want to know what God knows,
Yeah.
will I'm with those who asked, and who want to know.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's all. And I think about Eve and the short shrift that she received, because it was knowledge.
Yeah.
It's like, why are you keeping girls from going to school? You
hmm
know,
hmm
why would you start there
Yeah.
with her? And I'm cool with arrogant folks.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I should clarify for us to understand that we have God figured out, not to ask the question,
Yeah.
is where I think that the arrogance enters. For people to be like, oh, I know it. One of the things that came up for me, Reverend Naomi, when you were talking is like, uh, God can do anything but fail. And, another popular saying is, um, God don't need no matches. He's fire all by himself, and it's just like these colloquialisms that reinforce the infinite wisdom of God. And I love what you were saying. It's like God wants to partner with us. My mother took a hard left turn in her theological journey, and I am the better for it because she started asking questions
Mhm.
and stepping away from the dogma of Pentecostal apostolic tradition. I have some I'm not even going to start pulling books, but I got Manners and Customs of the Bible. I got pagan holidays, tradition. I got How to Deliver Sermon books. When I tell you it runs deep, I come from a long tradition of Pentecostal ministers, and it still creeps in. But what I've learned to do is to ask the questions. And sometimes I've heard him whisper back to me,
Mm.
right? And I think that that is when I'm completely surrounded by God's embrace, is when he starts to whisper back to me. And so asking the question, where is God? He's right here. Like he's never disappeared from me. The world may be going to hell in a handbasket, but he's never disappeared from me. And I think that I just want to I'm gonna press pause because we're gonna go over to Instagram. We're actually over by 5 minutes, and so I would ask you to wrap us up with one, like your takeaway wisdom. Um, 2, where people can find you on the internet, and 3, what do you think the world will look like in 5 years?
Great.
1, your takeaway wisdom. 2, where people can find you on the internet, and 3, what do you think the world will look like in 5 years?
One, you have to be in community with thinkers and folks who are. The new church has to be a wrestling team.
Yeah.
We got to be getting, Letterman jackets in this, and we got to be unafraid um, to flip it up, turn it down, do all the things, and not think that if we squeeze it, there's nothing left in it. Like we really got to wrestle with this. And MarvinKWhite.com, and on Facebook, Marvin K. White is where I mostly live. And in 5 years, I am of the belief that we're on the edge of something.
Mm-hmm.
And out of natural, political, scientific, medical upheavals, the potential of a rebirth, a renaissance, a golden age to come after that,
Mm-hmm.
that's what's possible.
Yeah.
If we don't look at the rubble and see potential, then we'll just live in the rubble. But that's why we need artists and thinkers and folks who can look at the pieces and rebuild something.
Yeah. Thank you. Who wants to go next?
I'm jumping in. The first question, just my thoughts and my wisdom. I agree with and concur with everything that's been said thus far. Honestly, my daddy always taught me, God is never scared of our questions. And so I stand true to that. And so whatever the question is, I believe that God is so awesome and amazing that he's willing to answer. I believe that he's not afraid of it. He's not upset by anything that we ask or any thoughts that we have. I think that's been one of the things that church has kind of steered us or geared us away from is the fact that God, if he's this amazing, he's not ashamed or afraid of anything that we ask. And so I challenge folks, whatever it is that you're thinking about, don't harp on it too long. Seek God. Honestly, go before him, ask those questions straight to God, ask those questions of other believers and other thinkers. There are other people that think the things that you think and that are questioning, the same things that you're questioning. And so I challenge you to ask God. I've asked God a lot in my life, and I don't feel like he's any, bit upset at me for asking the stuff that I ask, no matter how far it falls from what I've been taught growing up. And so I truly stand by that. You can follow me at Promises Church, PHL. So just make sure you check us out. We're a growing ministry. I'm the kind of pastor that, I'm here for it. People ask all the time, so what's the doctrine? And I'm like, well, we're not digging too deep on that. We still developing. And I thank God for being in that place and space, because I'm still learning. I will not be afraid ever one bit to tell anybody that I don't have, all the answers to every question that everybody asks me. And hopefully people respect my leadership position and respect me being able to say that I am still learning, still growing, still knowing. People teach me stuff and I learn stuff every single day, from members, from just people and other faiths. Let me be honest about that. I'm another person that I've studied other faiths, and I find great wisdom and things in other faiths. I've studied Islam for 2 years, not practiced, but studied. And it's such amazing wisdom and things to be taken from that. And so I'm that kind of person. Hopefully I don't scare anybody off. I did share this on my lives. I'm a little nervous right now. People might unfollow, but glory to God. I believe that God is that awesome, and that's who I am. And I thank God for putting me in that position.
No, people want to hear the word that you have. Let me harken back to my Pentecostal days. People want to hear the word that you have in your belly, because every time you start talking, the views go up. Do y'all see that? Like they start, it's like 5 little eye signs. It's like, oh, well, what's she talking about? So there's something in your voice that's pulling in the viewers. So I appreciate you being here and willing to open up for the conversation. Last question: where do you think the world will be in 5 years? What does it look like? Pastor Martin, for you.
Sure. In 5 years, I just think like Marvin K. White mentioned it earlier. Virtual is where we're moving more into that place in that space. Church is definitely not going to look like it looks now. And so you asked about the world, but I believe that more people are seeking God, however that looks for them now than ever before. People want something more. Like I mean, life has been crazy for a lot of people, and they want more out of it than whatever they've been experiencing. Even people who have been in church their entire lives are like, this can't be it. Like I want more, and so they want more, and so I feel like we're gonna have a more knowledgeable group of people. People are coming from different backgrounds and different faiths and different places and spaces, and they don't want superficial God. They don't want I put my black and white clothes and a doily on my head and I go into this place and space and serve this quote unquote God that only wants part of me and doesn't want me authentically. That's not where we're headed. We're headed to a place people want God, and they want more knowledge and more understanding, and they want to be loved on, and they want to love more, and they don't want to feel guilty who God created them to be. So that's where I see the world. Hopefully more understanding, more loving, more open, more accepting.
Thank you. Thank you. You said doily. My mama says doily too. Um, uh, Reverend Naomi, take us home.
I just feel led to say to whoever might be listening, there's nothing wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
There's nothing wrong with you. And that walking with God is a journey in discovering how God is incarnating you, not, a mirror to all of your stuff, all of the things, your regrets, your shames, it's faith is not an exercise in identifying pathologies. I think
Hmm.
faith is an exercise in trusting the abundance of God's creation.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's all I would say. There's nothing wrong with you,
Yeah.
Hmm.
and God is still beckoning you to come. Um, I am on all the social media things at Oh Holy Shift, shift with an F, Oh Holy Shift, and on Facebook at Naomi Washington-Leapheart. And in 5 years, I honestly think that I think that the institutionalized religion of Christianity in particular is not going to go down without a fight.
Mm.
And we think that we're seeing fight now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that what we're going to see is Christianity's last grasp
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
at its own collusion with power, its own, trying to maintain its own cultural status,
Mm-hmm.
economic status. And so in 5 years, I hope that we are, if we ain't in the middle of the war, that finally that finally
Yeah.
destroys this institutionalized thing, so that something new can emerge. Then I
Mm.
hope that we are in, at the end of the war, that and so that the revelation of God can be heard and
Yeah.
felt. I think all of this stuff is getting in the way of people actually experiencing God. And so I hope that the dust will be settled in 5 years and
Amen.
we can then get to work with God, right? So that's what I hope.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you all for being such wonderful guests. I hope we can do this at some point in the future. We are damn near 20 minutes over. So, I should have known. And then my conclusion is a popular thing that preachers say, and then they don't get to the conclusion. But let me ask you this. So, this is a brand new endeavor I'm doing, right? It's only a third episode, but it's not named. What do you think this podcast should be named?
Hmm.
I've asked all the guests that have come on before. What do you think I should name this? I was doing like a series of sexuality discussions, and somebody was like, all about sex. And I was like, yeah. And then we have the education or the religious discussion. So it was like, yeah, that won't work. All about sex won't work. And you can message me offline about it. But I will say, um, for those of you watching, all two of you, we are going over to Instagram. We are going over to Instagram, and you can follow me at Javontae LW, and we'll be continuing this conversation in what I like to call the afterglow, because Instagram don't like this technology I'm using to stream across platforms, and so they make me switch out of it. They'll shut me down. Please don't shut me down, Zuckerberg. But we're going over to Instagram for the afterglow. Javontae LW at all your favorite social media networks. And if you want to be in tune with the podcast and know what I do name it, or have any questions, or you want to get a text message when we go live, you can text 215-461-3580, the word podcast. You can text that to 215-461-3580, and we can stay in contact and stay connected. Thank you again to Pastor Martin, Marvin K. White, Reverend Naomi. I appreciate you more than you know. And thank you for watching. And if you're watching on the replay, just click the video here or here to find out what happened on the afterglow. And I'll see you next week.